Okay. I believe we're good to get started. So thank you for joining us today. In case, I think I know everyone on the call, but just in case, Alba Guevara with the City of Yonkers Department of Planning and Development. And we have Carl Bertrand, our consultant for Program Design and Development, Lee Ellman, our commissioner, and Lou Albano from our commissioner at the Department of Planning and Development are on the call listening as well. Just want to thank you all for participating today. And really, this is a chance for us to give you some information on the program and then just to listen to what you have to say and what you would like to contribute in terms of what's the best way the city can possibly use this home ARP money. I'll turn it over to Carl Bertrand for now, and then we'll be here listening. Thank you.
So hello, everybody. Yonkers has $4.6 million in new money, and it has to all be spent by September 2030. So the city could spend it all in 6 months, 2 years, 8 years, or anything in between. And for different kinds of projects, there might be a different timeline. There is 4 types of general activities that can be done. They're listed here. So you could create or preserve affordable housing. You could do tenant-based rental assistance. You could do any kind of supportive services that could be funded with a COC grant or an ESG grant or a HUD housing counseling grant. Or you could develop non-congregate shelter. So those are the 4 allowable activities. The city has to put together a general plan of the kinds of activities it will do and how it will spend the money, and would like to have that initial draft by mid-October and blessed by the mayor in final form and submitted to HUD by the end of December. And then probably by spring, it would have approval to move forward, by which time for some projects, at least, it's likely to be issuing an RFP. So you're basically helping us invent programs that you could apply for next spring and start by next summer or fall, is the basic timeline. The hard part is that you have an enormous amount of flexibility of the kinds of population you would serve, and it is a requirement that the city has to provide the opportunity to be served by all 4 populations. And it can't discriminate against any protected class. So it can't say we're only going to serve families, and it can't say we're only going to serve youth. And it can only with difficulty saying that a program would serve the mentally ill, and it would have to describe how it was going to have specialized services, but then anyone who needed those services would have to be able to apply, even if, anyway, it's complicated. But there are 3 stages, 3 things that need to be done. The first is we need y'all to figure out what Yonkers needs that you could do. We need ideas from you. The second then is the planning department needs to take all those ideas and say, Carl, invent a plan that could encompass these 8. And then I need to find a way to describe the plan about how all 4 populations are going to be eligible to apply, and any preferences that we're going to give to any specific population has to be justified in the need data and specifically stated as a preference, or it can't be done. So let me go over the 4 qualifying populations, because it will sort of blow your mind in terms of the flexibility of who you could serve. Give me a moment to find the screen. I'm going to send y'all copies of what we're going to be looking at so that you will have the specifics, but let me get to the right page. And now. There, do you see a page that says qualifying populations? So there are 4. And I'm gonna, we'll actually go through the specifics because it's not stuff to take for granted. So the first qualifying population is the literal homeless. And that includes everybody who's unsheltered or in a shelter, all the ways that you're familiar with. It's also someone who's at risk, at imminent risk of losing their housing in the next 14 days. And it's also unaccompanied youth under age 25 or families with children and youth who qualify as homeless under McKinney-Vento, meaning everyone who's doubled up is eligible under the homeless qualifying population. Except there's more details on 3. For the unaccompanied youth, they have to have not had a lease or an occupancy agreement in the last 60 days, 2 or more moves, and some reason that their instability is likely to continue. And that could be lack of a high school degree, low English proficiency, criminal history, all sorts of things. So it's not just everybody who's doubled up, it's everybody who's doubled up who fits one of those categories counts as the homeless. But now a second population that the city also has to serve is those who are at risk of homeless. So that can be below 30% of area income and doesn't have enough money or support networks to be able to find housing and meets one of the following conditions. They moved twice in the last 60 days. They doubled up with someone due to economic hardship. They have to leave where they are in 21 days. They live in housing that is overcrowded, more than 1.5 people per room. Or they're leaving an institution like foster care. Or, to continue, they don't qualify as homeless under youth that don't qualify as homeless under this section, but they do under 6 other federal grants, or 3, a youth who qualifies as homeless under McKinney-Vento, and that's where everyone who's doubled up due to economic hardship counts. So if they don't fit in category 1, they fit in qualifying population number 2. Qualifying population number 3 is everyone who's fleeing or trying to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, including labor trafficking. And then the 4th is other populations. And there are two ways to meet that. One is people who are getting temporary rent subsidies, but they're running out of time and they need more services in order to be able to afford their housing. So you could actually do like employment services, more employment services for someone in rapid rehousing, for instance, or anyone who's timing out of one of those programs. Or the second subset of the 4th qualifying population is that they either are below 30% of area median income, and everyone under 30% qualifies there, or they're below 50% of area median income, and they move 2 or more times in 60 days, they're overcrowded, etc. So I'm gonna send those to y'all. The complexity for me is I have to describe a process and a strategy for the city that will offer some kind of services to every one of those populations, and then justify in a way that HUD lawyers will review and approve any kind of targeting more specific than that. So what we need from y'all within that scope of what's possible is a two-step process. By October 3rd, I need you all to send a paragraph describing what you want to do that describes the activity, the amount of money. I'd suggest $500,000 or $1 million. You could go larger if you absolutely have to, but that hurts your chances of being chosen probably. And you could go small, but the city's not really interested in a whole bunch of tiny contracts. But you know, if you have a wonderful $150,000 service need, this is your chance. But what you're going to do, how much money you need, and who you want to serve. Those three facts. And we're going to be having 3 of these meetings with different groups of stakeholders. And I'm going to be trying to collect those sort of ideas. And then the planning department, if we get 15 of those ideas, has to say to me, Carl, design a plan that could fit 8 of these 8. And then I have to figure out the need data and the preferences that we would have that would make it possible to do at least some of the 8. So by October 3rd, I need that 1 or 2 sentences. And by October 7th, I need data, because we can't prioritize a population unless our statement of need documents that there's a particularly strong need for that. And with those 2 things, after that, it's the planning department figuring out what it would like to have possible, me figuring out how to present it to HUD, the mayor deciding whether or not he likes it, HUD deciding whether or not it's legal. And then by next spring, there might be an RFP where you actually get to apply for the program of your dreams. But the only way there'll be a program of your dreams is if you give us this crucial information between now and October 10th. Because if we don't write it in our plan, we can't target anything that isn't justified and explained in a legally acceptable way. Any questions?
Carl, a quick question.
Yeah.
Under the II list there of A through G of the 4th category, you know, it's the 50% of AMI, which we like, and C has the 21-day notice, which we like as a general criteria.
Well, it's actually that one is below 50%, and any one of A through G.
Right, any one. So exactly, we have the buffet of options there. But
And living in the home of another because of hardship gives you 10,000 more people you can serve.
Sure. Can you go above the II? Is there any other condition? Is there anything
No.
else conditional on
You're
that?
either below, if you're below 30%, you're eligible.
Right.
Oh, and experience severe cost burden, I'm sorry. Paying more than 50% severe, so below 30% of AMI and spending over 50% of your rent, of your household income on housing.
Well, yeah.
Makes you eligible for 4.1, or 4.2, you're up to 50% of AMI and any one of A through G.
Okay.
So I will send this to y'all, but basically it's like anybody you've dreamed of serving probably fits in one of these 4 populations.
Can I have some clarity? You said that you need some data, like needs data. I'm sure that John and I will have the same data. Are you wanting it per agency or per category, or how are you wanting?
No, we need to describe it. If we don't have citywide data, we at least need countywide data. So like, for instance, if you were saying severe housing cost burden, I could probably find that in the census. If you wanted to have some particular population, you'd need to be able to talk about the prevalence of that population.
Got it.
Because we could, for instance, say that there'll be some money for a homelessness prevention that's open to everybody, but points go particularly to people who qualify in 2 or 3. 2 is at risk and 3 is domestic violence. But then the program that gets invented has to take anybody from category 2 and 3 in the order they apply. So it's going to be a broad eligibility unless you say that you want it targeted in some way more specific and give me enough specifics that it persuades HUD that it makes sense that Yonkers is making this a priority because there's such strong need data for this slice of that much bigger group.
John, we should talk about that because I think that we should make an assessment of who we have on this wait list. Because that's a really crucial population. I mean, a lot of them are going to be at or below 50% of the AMI, 30% of the AMI. And I think that this wait list is growing still by the day. And
yeah, you would say Yonkers has a waiting list over 700 people that won't serve with ERAP, and that the ones who are on that list who fit into, I don't know, box 1 or box 3 or box 2 would be eligible for this, for the eviction prevention money the city has set aside in the order that they apply for it.
Carl, do you know in the eligibility, does HUD's eligibility on these require rent capture so that we're assisting people who are, I mean, traditionally the HUD assistance requires that we're assisting people that with the assistance, it guarantees they, well, we're preventing eviction.
I
know,
think
They're
that
not at risk afterwards.
there aren't as many rules for HOME-ARP as there are for ESG or the other more established. This is like one-time money where the city determines priorities. The city makes the case for those priorities. The city describes how it will allocate the money, how it will decide like which agencies and which clients get the money. And it doesn't really go much beyond that. If HUD approves that we are doing eligible things for eligible populations in a way that doesn't violate laws and that follows what gets written in the plan the mayor submits, it sounds like we've got a lot of flexibility in terms of what we do. But there's going to be a lot of information that's coming out about HOME-ARP, and it's probably going to continue coming over time. So it may get more complex than it is by the time we submit our plan.
Hey, Carl.
But I think the key thing is you try to get the activities funded and the populations identified as priorities that matter to you.
Carl, how does the countywide data help if this is only based for Yonkers participants?
For most things, it's going to be the only data that's available.
Okay.
So, you know, if there's census data on a question that's more local, that's better data. But if like most of the homeless data, we might be able to get some literally homeless data. Every population is going to have its own challenges.
Carl, can I ask you a question real quick? Is there a distinction or conflict or anything between those at the shelter here? I mean, we're not a shelter, I'm sorry. At the Y, we are able to obtain DSS assistance, rental assistance, maybe through a move-in or deposits or anything like that. Is any conflict between that and the tenant rental assistance from this grant?
You would probably want to, either the city as it defined the RFP might set some requirements, so they might want you to, but it would probably have to be that there is a real lease. It would be likely that someone would say there should be a lease, it shouldn't exceed FMR, and the person should provide 30% contribution the way they normally do. And that would kind of be a reasonable thing. If somebody had rent from another source, it would seem like they didn't need it. If it wasn't enough money to actually do their rent, then there is a real need that you're addressing. And HUD, I think, isn't going to say we can't add two sources that equal the right amount. It's an unusual chance for you to get money to do things that haven't been possible before, for a longer time than before, for a more flexible population than before. But you have to think quickly what it is, because if we don't carve the channels, it won't be possible with this. But for instance, one thing that many of you might want, tenant-based rental assistance and services, put a dollar amount, and even quarter millions, and which population you would like it for. And if the city got 6 of those, it might decide that people would like $4 million for tenant-based rental assistance. Let's budget 1 or 1.5 for 2 million or something like that, and then have an RFP for tenant-based rental assistance that these populations are eligible for. And then the best proposal would get funded. But I think that's the way that this is likely to work. That you
When do you want this by?
say that again.
When do you want it by?
The sentences by close of business on October 3rd, and the data to back it up by October 7th. And by October 14th, I need to have a draft plan in Lou's hands that describes the legal way to do what the city would like included. The city will probably decide based on y'all's 2-sentence summaries which ones they would like to keep in the running. And I suspect that they will keep more in the running than they can eventually fund. And my challenge is just to make enough channels that they could go to any of those places based on the results of the RFP.
My question to you is, do you think it could be open-ended in one of two ways? What do you think is the best route for us all to approach it? Is it individually, or do you think that, you know, we have a conversation and say, hey, what are you guys seeing versus what we're seeing? And how do we come to a kind of like a larger agreed upon plan? Because all in all, I guess eviction prevention is the goal. So I would love to see that we have some cohesion around how we approach it. That way the money is put in the right places, but I don't know like what your recommendation.
Like you know, all the local eviction prevention agencies could say, we'd like $1 million for category 1, 3, and 4, with particular preference to the 700 households on the list. And the city might decide, well, you asked for $1 million, they're only going to put $500,000 into that pot. You know, they'll have to allocate the whole thing. So they would decide how much went in. An RFP would decide who got it. And if you wanted that preference for the 700 families, I need to find a legally valid way to do that. I think having them already facing eviction and massive rent arrears and a lack of any more ERAP is a pretty good statement of need. The city's just going to be balancing. There's so many things they could do with this money. How big a priority is eviction prevention? And that's where they put a dollar amount on it. And y'all put whatever preference you want on it. And if what you said appeals to the city, they tell me to make a channel that could go there. So there could be an eviction prevention channel. It could be a TBRA and services for a specific populations channel. If somebody has housing that is at risk or that could be started, it doesn't go very far for housing, but if there's a $250,000 or $500,000 or $1 million that makes a big difference. You can say we need $500,000 renovations for a major SRO to keep that affordable housing. And who knows how the city, when they get $25 million worth of requests for $4 million and have to sort of put them in pots, which ones they want to keep in the running. You should just make your best case. And I do think they won't make the final $4.6 million cut. They may make channels that could go towards $12 million in request and let the RFP process. And probably the way we would describe the RFP is it's going to look at quality of the plan, experience of the applicant, and local need. And so if there are multiple applicants for the same thing, that's probably the kind of criteria that they say they'll use when it comes time for the RFP to decide which specific agency gets how much money. But that's next year's problem almost.
As far as the general timeline, hi, I'm Dewan Stark. I recently joined West Hub, so I don't think I know most of you. Nice to meet the group, and thank you, Carl. There looks like there's a public process that is part of this. Who is that? Who is that population? Is it the list of folks that are in risk of displacement? How does that work? How does that inform what we're petitioning to you? Does the timeline kind of flow after the point that we're going to provide our insight first, and then after the fact, there's going to be more public scrutiny on this?
There's like before and after, there's going to be more. There's like 12 required groups of stakeholders. Homeless housing providers, I think, is one. Legal services, domestic violence or victim service agencies, I think, is one. Minority advocacy groups. So there's Yonkers, the Westchester, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle are all have pots of money. Yonkers has more than anyone else. But those 4 groups were, with help from the COC, held a massive public forum with like there's several hundred participants invited, like probably 100 people logging on. It was done on Zoom. It was simulcast on YouTube. Written comments were solicited before and after. All of that's collected. So there's probably 35 pages of public input already. What Yonkers is now doing is soliciting local input at the stage when it's ready to start deciding which channels should be carved. And then they're going to be having another meeting with local developers. There'll be another forum after that. Once there is a plan, it's got to be published and have public comment again from everybody in the world. So we're at the stage by mid-October, we'd like to have a private plan endorsed by the Department of Planning that the mayor and local officials can consider and think about, and then make a decision. And then HUD will have all of its people, particularly its lawyers, review it by line, and then we'll change it. And, however they tell us to change it. And then when we actually do RFPs or other kinds of things, there's going to be public notice in that stage too. But this whole plan, once we decide what's being proposed, that has to have local public comment after it's like published in the press that it's available and put on the planning department website and wait for feedback. So, but y'all are having a chance to put in pithy ideas at a crucial moment.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions or thoughts? So I'll send you all this link that we're looking at with the 4 qualifying populations. There's another link that is sort of all the basic information about it, but it's sort of what I need is which population you want to serve and which of the the qualifying populations, because the city's plan has to address all four. And I think if it has a plan that does 1 and 3, then it needs another part of the plan that does 2 and 4, or at least another part of the plan where all 4 could apply. We've got to tell HUD that all 4 of these qualifying populations are addressed, at least potentially addressed somewhere in Yonkers' plan. So the any particular ideas for like services that are crucial? DV services, self-sufficiency services, part of eviction prevention that's missing. So you could, for instance, also say that we have rent arrears, but we don't have blank, or we have shelter, but we don't have enough employment services. Or if there is any kind of gap, this is an extraordinary flexibility to be able to fill that gap, to fill it for 5, 6, 8 years. But only if you identify it now, so that we build in the ability to do that.
I
So Carl, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying in self-sufficiency, I think that we see a lot of people that can't sustain moving forward. And if we could give them a small subsidy while working with them to improve their financial profile, whether that's a training, whether that's a shift in jobs or going back to school or whatever that looks like, I would love to see that. We have a lot of ERAP clients that are going to come back to us because we technically them and they can't necessarily afford it.
You can propose that. It's just going to be spread out on the table for the city to decide what's a priority. If you can you don't have to just have the 2 sentences. That's the part that I care about most. But if you want another paragraph or 2 to make the case, that everyone who sees it, who's helping to make that decision in Yonkers, could see what you submit, and so you could try to make your best case for being able to do that. One of the things you're going to have to decide is the time frame. The longer you go, the fewer you serve. But if you need more time to solve a problem, or if you need tenant-based rental assistance for a longer period of time before someone can be self-sufficient, as the period goes up, the numbers served go down. But it's almost like poker. The more you request, the less your odds of actually getting your wish granted. So you don't want to, it would be very hard for you to win taking 2/3 of the whole city allocation, unless you just like blew everyone else out of the water because your idea was so exceptional. It would be better to make a smaller bid for the share of the pot.
So Carl, I would, for like on behalf of FISI, thinking about our populations, Family Service Society of Yonkers, I would probably propose tenant-based rental assistance plus essential support services for our kinship caregivers, because they're housing cost burdened. Majority of them, they're about 82% of the kinship families we serve are very low or low incomes. These are predominantly seniors who suddenly have a few children to care for in housing first that probably is not the appropriate size. And with such fixed incomes, we recently did a housing survey with our clients, and over 60% are paying more than 40% towards their rent. And that's not really sustainable in a household with multiple people. And so there's been a desperate need for quite a long time on various fronts. So that would be our thought in that area.
Yeah, that would help prevent homelessness and help prevent kids going into the child welfare system.
Right, right. It's all about stability and maintaining family. And so, yeah, absolutely homelessness and the child welfare system component is a big one for us given the population.
Another thing that y'all could think about, New Rochelle is considering using some of their HOME-ARP maybe to do tenant-based rental subsidies for elderly, disabled, and working poor people who are facing eviction, arrears, but can't get anyone to pay the arrears because they can't afford the money going forward. And to actually give enough of a subsidy to make it possible to sustain the housing enough so that other people would pay the arrears. Because it's becoming clear with the eviction prevention network that there are some people who were just screwed because it's not a temporary problem anymore. Their income just hasn't kept up with the rent. So elderly, disabled, and working poor are politically sympathetic groups. You couldn't do many, but somebody could do some. So it's another possibility. It's almost a question like, what do you most want to do, or what do you think the community most needs, or what you would be best at? Also to go into your choice of what you're proposing.
Interesting.
What was that?
That's interesting.
You seldom get the chance to dream and have programs invented that fit your dreams. And this collectively is actually a chance to do that. Like there's something that nobody's ever done before that benefits some part of these 4 qualifying populations. And that fits within tenant-based rental assistance services eligible under the COC, ESG, or HUD, or HUD housing counseling, or is preserving the affordable housing. The other thing that's good for y'all is you don't have to write 20 pages because no one's going to decide based at this stage based on 20 pages. It's really, I'm probably going to have a 3-page list of people's ideas, and the planning department's going to check the ones that they think could fit together into reasonable sized channels that fit some kind of reasonable allocation between different priority activities. And then I have to try to figure out how to do all that without breaking the law. Luli and Alba, have they said anything inappropriate so far?
I don't think so. I think this is the best way to do it. I mean, we could just, open it to ideas today, but I think having it in writing and really having an idea that, we can really consider over the next 2 to 3 weeks is probably the best way to go about it.
Because it's complex. The fact that you have to serve all 4 and not exclude anybody illegally makes it hard to target unless we know it, we explain it, we documented the need, and we specify as a preference and how we're going to do it. And then the HUD lawyers say, yes, that would be legal. Any other thoughts, ideas, questions? October 3rd. Go ahead.
John, I just think that we should have a conversation because earlier I was looking at like Alice numbers in Yonkers. 10701 accounts for like 45% of like like 45% of the households in 10701 are Alice, meaning that, you know, they're asset limited, income constrained, but they're employed. So I think that we should have a larger conversation EPN wise.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, let's plan it on the side. Okay.
So besides sending you this list and the list of activities and the link to the general instructions, I'll have a simple timeline with October closed business October 3rd. The 2 sentence is due October 7th. Need date is due probably by October 14th. The planning department will be looking at a plan, or at least the outlines of a plan. By the end of the year, approval by spring, blessing, and by next summer or fall implementation. If you had like a site specific thing, you might have a different timeline. And if the city was going to do any of that, they probably wouldn't say we'll do an RFP. They'd probably say we're going to preserve affordable housing, and we've done an assessment, and this is the lucky site that gets this much of the money. So that may, services and rent subsidies can be kind of a generic thing, or eviction prevention can be kind of a generic thing that's done by RFP. If you have a site specific idea, you probably need to propose that. And I bet the city would have to decide whether to make room for that. I guess they could, if they got a bunch of those, they could say we will have $1 million for renovations to preserve affordable housing, and do that by RFP. But tell them what you need, and then we'll try to figure out they'll figure out what they want me to build in, and I'll try to figure out a structure that makes room for it all. Any questions about like eligible services?
They're not defined here, right? I mean, there's not a proscription of kinds of services, and there's not a.
What I've read is that if you can fund it with COC, ESG, or HUD Housing Council, so you could, WRO could decide that enforcing source of income discrimination needs an extra paralegal or something. So who knows? The DV world, human trafficking world, each of those may have some very specific needs, and we have to at least have an opportunity for DV survivors, that category, qualifying population 3, I think it is. So that's a very real possibility that Yonkers will have something in its plan for that work. This is sort of fun, actually.
Well, I definitely see an opportunity, you know, if selected. I think the kinship family population being able to provide rent subsidies because this is a very unique population amongst a wider population, and most of the clients we serve are in Yonkers. It's Westchester wide, but predominantly Yonkers locally. This is a very interesting and creative opportunity, as you pointed out. It really would make a huge difference for these particular families, and you know we've been working with them for many years, and so being able to offer this sort of support for potentially 5 years. I mean, we know that that many of these caregivers, these grandparents, you know, you would think some of these kinship cases they might be in and out, but most have the children in their care for 3 to 5 or more years. From the data that we have, at least 60% are 3 or more years, 40% are 5 or more years. So to be able to provide this level of support for that length of time is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, you're always left only able to respond to the RFPs that someone else has written. And now
Can't hear you, Carl. Can't hear you, Carl. Can't hear you, Carl.
Normally, you can only respond to the RFPs that someone else designed, and this is your chance to set the parameters for the RFP that you wish you could respond to. Okay, anything else? Alba, do you have everybody's information so that
I do, Carl, when you get ready to send out the info that you talked about, send it to me and I'll send it out because
Right.
not everybody attended the meeting that I originally invited. So I would like to make sure that everyone who was originally invited gets the information.
Okay, I think I'm gonna do a very short, like 4 or 5 slide PowerPoint that's got the key facts, links to some other things. And then in addition to like 3 pages of this longer document that describe the qualifying populations. Because people really need to understand the range of who they could serve.
Yep. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, reach out to Carl or I, and we'll get back to you in a timely manner since we want the first piece of this by October 3rd.
Right.
It's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
brainstorming.
Have fun.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
I used to like I used to like going to a diner and making up $1 million budget on a napkin. This is sort of like that. But, okay, thank you much.